is unabashedly a black man. He don't apologize for it. He doesn't apologize for the work that he does. And he offers it as a gift for others to receive and know, this is me, and this is what I can do, and this is what I can be. And it makes a tremendous impression, I think, on anybody who touches it, who views it, but who also touches it.
Charles Dickson had a very creative beginning that laid the foundation for his present career. His father was a master gourmet baker of Jewish pastries and a cake decorator at work. His mother had a flair for color and design as an interior decorator. With this combination, DNA really matters, and in Charles's case, it paid off. For the last 50 years, Charles Dickson has practiced the art of sculpting. Dickson's obsession with finding the truth of a form has been documented in his 45-year homage to African American women. Rather than work from an imaginary form, he realized early in his career that he had to undress it to uncover the truth of its essence. Dickson's work with Black Nudes was also the precursor for a much larger artistic dialogue on the politics of beauty and how the consequences of slavery reverberated in contemporary society that has extended throughout his entire career.
In the words of Charles Dickson, being an artist is a gift, a way to pray and to create the visions of the past, present, and the future. It is a need to continue and to establish a trail that reflects my growth as a sculptor and as an African American. Born in 1947, Charles Dickson grew up in South Central Los Angeles when it was predominantly African American. As a young boy, he suffered from severe asthma. Following frequent medical appointments, Dickson and his mother would stop at major department stores where they looked at fabrics and other materials used by designers. This encouraged Charles to develop a strong aesthetic sense, reinforcing the foundation for his subsequent artistic productivity. These medical trips also provided him with a lifelong appreciation of other cultures. Both of his parents supported his artistic ambitions. The Pasadena Arboretum is known for the largest collection of trees from around the world and its wild peacocks. In 2011, the Arboretum collection suffered severe damage from a windstorm, and hundreds of trees were destroyed. Charles was commissioned to create an art piece from one of the salvaged trunks, a native Hawaiian monkey pod tree.
The most inspiring thing is that Charles is an inventor. His mind can gather things from I don't know where. It's how he gets it from the universe and brings it into physical matter is the most inspiring thing to me. That amazes me, how he can work in so many materials and methods. I'm a one-pony show, and he can go from clay to wood to metal. It's so overwhelming. I'm inspired because if I could just learn one thing, I feel like it's amazing. It's just amazing. His mind is so inspiring to me.
Shown here is the carving that Charles created out of the trunk of a rare monkey pod tree. He has named it Dance of the Wood Nymphs. It portrays the human spirit in relationship to nature.
I curated a show called Forces of Nature, and Charles did an exquisite piece out of a giant monkey pod tree that fell in a storm. And he created figures of women dancing around a full moon. And the full moon is a ring that the tree formed naturally. And as you look at these women and their exquisite forms, their arms up, they are part of the tree. They are the tree. They are the moon. They are magnificent.
I really tried to get into the full nature of the tree itself. When you carve something like this, it's going to give you a certain kind of creative perspective, because you have to surrender your creativity to the tree, to nature, what it's going to give you. And it was interesting. A friend of mine said, "Oh, it was hollow in the first place." No, it was not. And I documented this piece, carving all of it through. And so all this was a basic, solid stock of the tree. Really. So it was slowly, I had to even develop carving chisels to get in there and certain spots. Yeah. You had to carve certain areas by sticking your tool in.
I lived in Compton from 1975 to 1977, and at that time, I didn't have a place to work because we were starting the marketplace for artists, and so Charles actually opened up his studio to me. I was one of the few people he ever gave a key to come and go as I please in his studio, and I was there almost every day, you know, working with him and doing my own thing at the time. And at that time I had a son that was with me. He was maybe 2 years old. So we would ride down through Compton on a bicycle, and he'd be on the back. And after about a week or two, all the store owners were waving and saying hello, and it was a cool situation. But you know, working with Charles is a lot of the stuff was I did my thing, he did his thing, and whenever he needed help with anything, then I would work with him.
Charles inspires his protégés to explore their surroundings, to touch and feel the energy of unexpected materials, and to excite their senses with these uncommon and found objects.
I'm an artist because of Charles, and because of the Black Arts Movement made me realize I can be an artist from nature and just picking up stuff, discarded stuff. And I don't like he says, I can't even go past junk anymore without trying to take it home with me and be like, okay, what can I build with this? And so I'm a parent, and I'm an artist. If there's a school, I want to be part of it. I want to learn what he has to pass on to the next generation, because he's like a genius inventor. He has a nonverbal communication, a high psychic energy, similar to Coltrane and jazz. So if I'm having a difficult time with a piece, he'll be like, oh, you need this. And I'm like, you're reading my thoughts. And like, even if I'm struggling based on the weight of a tool or the material, he'll know exactly what to do and give me to fix that. Like my gloves were too big, I wasn't seeing correctly, and he could intuitively know what I needed without a word. That blows my mind. And even the music that's played, it's like if I'm having something going on in my life, he'll play a soundtrack that will answer my question. So that, some people ain't gonna understand what I'm saying, but that is priceless. So that's like a father figure, an ancestor speaking to you. It's almost like a griot coming from another world telling you what you need here today to continue on in the future.
I think his teaching style is natural, is incredible, because he has compassion about people, about life, and he likes to see people do better. And that's his whole approach to teaching, is to see that people do better in life and are basically happy with what they're doing.
Charles was a featured artist at the opening of the 2015 Nature of Sculpture exhibit at the Arboretum. I just believe that everything he's doing this thing about
a Hope and Faith Park, or Faith and Hope Park. And it's about the hummingbirds and the butterflies and tying us back to nature that I think our culture has been ashamed of because of the slavery part. And so that's just helping me in my journey with my children and the next generation to bring us back to the land. That's what I take from it. So I feel like I'm a steward of the land, and I use art as my method of social change.
Speaking of social change, over the years, Charles has been commissioned to create artistic public works. The South Central community of Willowbrook, along with the Los Angeles Neighborhood Land Trust, have worked for over 2 years to create a nature-centered park called Faith and Hope. Facing 119th Street and bordered by an alley that has known violent acts, the community, along with the Los Angeles Neighborhood Land Trust, commissioned Charles to create 300 feet of artistic fencing. Several contract amendments and delays led to the actual work on the fence to begin later than anticipated, and Charles persevered through it all, focused on the goal, an artistic and practical installation. As you can see, the gateway, the invitation to the park, was initially installed, and then for reasons that are not clear, Charles was terminated. The community so firmly stands behind Charles and his vision that in spite of this termination, they gathered and stood with Charles as he and his crew erected more panels of the fencing. The community also lent a hand cleaning up the littered alleyway and some of the park space itself. Those of us who were there to witness Charles physically lead his installation team and were able to watch his hands-on involvement know how much of his heart is attached to the enclosure he has created. Many gathered couldn't believe the sheer beauty of his fencing. It is a declarative visual statement, an invitation to come inside and feel protected while contemplating nature and finding oneness with God. Charles's fence is faith and hope. Charles's early exposure to the appreciation of beauty inspired his artistic instincts and love of shape and form. Early on, he revealed his joy and thirst to learn by exploring new techniques and materials, and by challenging his mind and his hands to bring his visions into tactile form. Charles does recall many of his teachers, especially from John C. Fremont High School in South Central, that encouraged his talent, and the many established artists who opened his eyes to different ways of expression, as well as those art forms rooted in the ancient cultures of Africa and Mexico.
I first discovered Charles when my wife and I attended a opening of some of his works at a library in Compton. This had to be in the early 70s. We were fascinated by the work that we saw, not only because it was beautiful, but it was an image of the backs of 4 or 5 African-American women. And the curvature of the spine suggested a rhythm to the piece. And it was built out from the surface with chicken wire and newspapers. And we inquired about the process by which he created this piece. And he said that he used found material from the residuals of one of the rebellions in the neighborhood. So he used asphalt, chicken wire, newspapers, crayons that he melted down for color, and acrylic paint. And this piece was about, I'd say 6 feet long and about 3.5 feet tall. And I've forgotten what the name of the piece was officially, But I put the piece in my office, in my dermatology office, in my practice, and it quickly got titled "The Butts." And the patients would see this piece and be struck by it, because not only was it beautiful, it was powerful, and it was quite suggestive. So I had to keep my staff aware of the fact that people wanted to touch that piece, and they would poke holes in the chicken wire and damage the piece. So they were on alert to make sure that the young kids particularly didn't bother that piece, but just saw it for what it was, a very beautiful and powerful piece. So we purchased that piece and took it home. And from that intro, Charles and I and my wife, and then later with Darlene, struck up a friendship that has extended to this very day. And we're grateful for it.
Charles Dickson, I met through the gallery circuit. Howard Swerdloff introduced us many, many years ago. And as an individual, I can't say that there's any artist that impresses me more than Charles. Who he is for the community, who he is for himself, who he is for as a teacher, for young artists, as a role model. He's an extraordinary man. He stops what he's doing and explains it so that anyone feels like they possibly could do what he does. And then if you look at what his finished product is, if you stand back and see what the work of Charles Dickson's, it's extraordinary. It is magnificent. It is a one of a kind, and there are very few people on the planet that could replicate it. And there is no one else who could make you feel like you might have that within you. And that's how he inspires kids, adults, other artists. He's amazing on every level. He's kind, he's thoughtful, he's generous, and he gives of himself and his art to the public, to his friends, to the casual passerby. He gives us something that we remember.
Indeed, Charles has offered us all something to remember. His work captures his spirituality, his intelligence, his curiosity, and his willingness to always try new forms of expression and help us question our own attitudes. An example is his dedication to the beauty of the Black female form. If we say he studied the female form, we might giggle at the man, and yet we would have to acknowledge that Charles's fascination and study has contributed positively and enormously to forwarding Black women's sense of self, grace, and beauty. His body casts have identified 15 unique body types, and his sculptures portray all the sensuality, grace, and beauty that his spirit has drawn him to unveil. Also, he cast over 10 bodies for the slavehold exhibit mounted by Tim Watkins of the Watts Labor Community Action Committee. Watkins had been given the slave ship prop from the movie Amistad that Steven Spielberg directed. As a matter of fact, one of our contributing photographers, Donna Dimely, was cast as a slave, praying for the slaves.
I always had a great love for women. And it's the form, because women are really the keepers of creativity. They're the only beings on the planet. The feminine, the female, they're the ones that give birth. So creativity comes basically through the women, and he's always known that, and he's always respected that. And so the way he pays homage to that is by his sculpture, and he did a series of castings, body castings, of all different size, shapes, and ages of women, that was showing people, you know, all the different sizes and shapes of women, and to appreciate all of them.
I think Charles Dickson and his work is extremely important to the Black community for a number of reasons. One, because he documents the spirit of hope. He engenders in the people who view his works techniques that out of some of the worst situations, beauty can be formed.
A lot of, the struggles and a lot of the breakthroughs that mostly black people have in life, and he expresses that. And he also makes you aware of form. He works with form that like nobody I've seen before. It's just amazing how he can express and have something say so much in such a small way. It's just amazing to me how he can sculpt a woman's figure, and it's almost lifelike. You can feel everything about it that's true to life.
What inspired me to become a sculptor was basically I saw a neighbor carving on a piece of wood, and he was making a little wood knife with a penknife that he was carving with. So I became fascinated with that whole process. And in doing so, I went and got my mother's butcher knife, and I started hacking on wood to such an extent to where once I started going through this process, I couldn't stop. I would whittle in bed. I would do all kinds of stuff. I would get a new little sharp tool, and I would carve on. We had TV tables at that time. My end of the TV table was all whittled up, and I would carve on furniture and different things like that. So I was just totally interested in making wood toys, finding out what sharp objects did what. Basically, that was it. But I did not, excuse me, have a clue as to what artists were per se. I was just fascinated with that process. So as time went on, I became more fascinated with what I could make from these techniques that I had learned or I had practiced, because the whole terminology of self-taught is actually not correct. It's actually divinely taught. It's a matter of practicing what you've given. And so by using what I was practicing and my passion, I started working with trying to make figures of female forms. I did things like, I saw the movie Moby Dick, and I said, oh man, that is an incredible creature. And so I did the research on the sperm whale. So I carved me out a sperm whale and fixed him up. And I still have that piece. I gave it to my aunt, and when she passed, she gave it back to me. I would carve things like pirate boats and sail ships, all kinds of things like airplanes, anything and everything that fascinated me in the external world.
Charles is one of the unique individuals that I know of, but I think he's probably typical of more artists than we realize. But what Charles has always done was try to find the optimum medium for the creation of his work. So he's been involved with plastics and hiss puff and wood and metal and cement. He created some cement faces on little spikes that we stuck in the landscaping of the apartment building which we own. He is best, I think, and this is my personal prejudice with it, I think he's best with wood. His wood pieces just strike me particularly as being singularly beautiful and extremely creative. When we moved, part of the year we spend in South Carolina. So when we move some of the pieces that we have from Los Angeles to South Carolina to furnish that home, we needed some end tables. And I asked Charles if he thought that he knew of a place where we could get these end tables that would be nice. I didn't expect that he would say, I'll make you some. So he made 2 end tables for our bedroom, and they're extraordinary. They're on wood petals that look like flowers blossoming. And on the top you have this ceramic finish, and he has an opening for the drawer that you slide your hand across and opens it up, and then you slide your hand this way and it closes. So we were just awestruck, you know, I mean, it's extraordinary. So his work has evolved over the years, but it's remained very rooted in a way, because he maintains an urban African American feel. So he's true to his culture in the expression of his work. And it's got a kind of a message to it that speaks to your own background and what you feel rooted with as a people and as a individual. So he expands all the time. He's always asking different questions of himself and getting answers that he wants to act out in the creation of these pieces.
When I discovered that I had the talent to be a sculptor, wow, that's really a big moment, because that really didn't come until quite a while later, after I had done grade school. What happened at the age of 12, one of the initiating things that brought about the carrying on of that whole process of making things was that I was making objects and I was selling them to my teachers. At 12, I became a professional artist, craft person that was making money at doing these objects. I did focus my attention on learning everything that had been sculpted, because I went to the library and found out everything that I liked sculpturally. I didn't say that I was a sculptor and an artist that was going to be doing this for the rest of my life until I graduated from high school. By that time, I had actually made a reputation as a young artist. In my school, I was a protege, or there's another word for it. But in any case, everyone expected for me to do something great in the art world. I was winning awards and doing stuff like that. That kind of gave me an idea. But when I graduated, after I had went to UCLA, Otis Art Institute, Chenard's, you know, I just done the whole go around to see what I was going to do with my life. And when I graduated, the call was just do the work, do the art, and be true to yourself. And so that's what I did. I was given that advice by Charles White. I was given that advice by Danny Johnson, and even Noah Purefoy. So that's what I did.
Well, my wife and I were intent on counteracting some of the negative imagery that the African American community is painted with, this brush of inadequacy and inferiority and so forth and so forth. We totally reject that. And so we made it a point to put on the walls and on the bookshelves work by African American artists and authors that was a symbol of excellence and a demonstration of that excellence in their product. So we purposefully surrounded them with African American art and African American books and literature. So Charles has been a great influence because he's always ready to demonstrate his skill with anything that you ask him to do. My wife had an expansions program, which was an educational program over the summer for several weeks, like 6-7 weeks, and it was outstanding. And she asked Charles to participate in the art fashion in the expansion school curriculum. And he was only too happy to do it, and he was outstanding in it. So he works with children very well. And our kids know Charles. They know Charles from growing up. And they appreciate his work, and they'll tell you how much they appreciate Charles.
I'm thinking of a piece in front of the African American History Museum called Wishing on a Star. It is phenomenal. It is a recycled piece, as Charles works with recycled materials. And I see the piece perhaps differently than Charles would describe it. But Charles had a really serious reaction to working with wood, and it put him in the hospital. And it meant that he could no longer do the things that he loved in the way he loved working, with his hands on the wood and breathing the scent of the wood, or his lungs would shut down. So he spent time in the hospital, and when he came out, he had to either give up working with wood or approach it in a whole new way. Well, Charles Dickson can approach anything in a whole new way. And that's what he did. He reinvented himself as a woodworker, wearing a spacesuit and a respirator and looking like a man from another planet on Earth, like he's like a spaceman. So the piece Wishing on a Star in front of the museum shows a morphing Charles Dickson, or another man very much like Charles Dickson. And from the rear of the piece, you see beautifully articulated muscles, legs, and human form. And as it moves forward and up, it's transformed into a man of the stars, a man in a spacesuit, a man with a respirator, a man with a vision. And Charles's vision is right there in front of us. The stars are sparkling, they're beautiful. And that piece creates energy. It moves and it twists and it lights and it harvests rainwater. It does so many things. It brings each of us in touch with something much greater than ourselves.
The breakthrough with Wishing on a Star was that I went through a tremendous depression. And depression comes whenever I do not practice my creative self, my spirit. And that has always been with me. And so I know that as I develop whatever I do, there's my private, there's my collaboration, and the job. Sometimes someone will come to me and says, hey, can you make a Mickey Mouse? Yeah, I'll do that for a price. I can collaborate with you and we can build something together with the understanding of how you think you want something to look or what. And I have the technology to do that, but I cannot function without my personal expression. It could be, and I've learned that it doesn't have to be big to release this creativeness that needs to exist. It could be very small, it could be a very big thing, doesn't matter. So in doing so and understanding that, I went through a deep depression, and there was a show coming up at CAM, and so I submitted my idea. Basically, was to create this guy that was part of the human, but evolving into a spaceman. So I made a little model from cardboard, but I went through a great. I finally convinced myself if I did not take the model down and show it to them, if I did not participate, then I cannot blame anyone for my condition or what was going on. So I had to take control or, take a step in faith and do this. So I did that, and I ended up doing that piece, Wishing on a Star. And it actually was a piece after I had cut up a car. I mean, it was like, I had cut up a car. I had cut up a car and cutting up the car because I didn't have welding equipment or cutting equipment of that sort. I cut up an 09 prototype Lexus car, and I turned it into a cheetah and a hummingbird. Very long, very artistic kind of thing that could be pulled by a trailer, by an electric vehicle. In any case, what came out of all that equipment was Wishing on a Star. And I had all the equipment. I was not allowed to weld anything without special eye equipment and things like that, protection, breathing protection, because that was a way that I was able to exist, to get through all the dust and all the things I did do. So once all those things were in place, now I had a chance to just play, to really express. And so that's what I did. I got into that expression, and I had such a good time. It took me about 2.5 months to do that piece. But I had never MIG welded, and I had never really used the cutting torch in that particular way. I've learned how to bend rebar. The show is about recycling materials. So, but I had such a good time in building that piece, and when they looked at it, everyone was just so elated about what it was. I was just elated about having the opportunity to do it. So when the piece was installed, the board members and the people said, we want to buy it. And in buying it, that gave me another jump. It actually enabled me to do other commissions with metal. I didn't realize that metal, working with torches and things, was like a basic thing that you use to survive in your art building. So it enabled me to do other things like Faith and Hope Park, Urban Flowers, which are stainless steel, and some other things. I mean, I'm always doing something.
This has been very important to the life of our family. James really introduced him to us, in that James has always been very impressed with young African-American artists who wanted very much to share their gifts and talents in a way that would inspire other people. And as a result, raising a large family, because we had 7 children, and then with my sister's child, who we were blessed to have, we had 8 kids running around in our home. And we always wanted to impress upon them the beauty, the importance of the gifts that we are given by God and how to use them in a constructive way. And Charles represented that a lot to our children. And so when we start engaging Charles, amongst other artists, to bring them into our home with their creations, it was a curiosity to our children, and a good one, because they were interested in what it was made of, how it was made, what did it mean, and it really did afford us an opportunity to have very interesting discussions in terms of who we are as a people, in terms of the gifts and talents that we are given as individuals, and how we can use it to be a blessing to someone else. So how it helped our children is that it exposed them to the fact that somebody did this, which means that they can too do these kinds of things. And so we brought into our own home easels, paper, magic markers, crayons, scissors, paste, and they were able to thereby engage in creating things and not be intimidated.
He invented a full bodysuit where it's a mask that fits over his full face, and he put a filtration system that he can hook it up to his compressor, and that way by the time the air gets to him in the mask, he's not breathing any outside air, he's breathing all filtered air. So that really helped him a lot. And he would suit up so he wouldn't be in too much contact with dust. He's such a humble person that he can actually just talk to anybody, and that's the thing that's always really impressed me about Charles is he is so humble, but yet he's basically a genius in what he does, and he is an icon in his community, you know. Not that many people realize it, but he is doing things that is really remarkable.
First commission that I can remember because I did other things too. I learned to survive with doing smaller things. I made and designed awards for organizations. But when it came down to that first commission, which is Curtis High, Junior High School in Carson, I did a bust of Martin Luther King. And that was brought to me by Cecil Ferguson and his organization. And by that time, I was pretty well known as a sculptor of many medias. But I felt good. It was just another adventure. It was another way of doing, having a chance to participate. And the budget wasn't that big, but what it introduced me to was the Foundry in such a way where when I finished that job, the Foundry people had respect for what I was doing as well. And a larger project came after that. But that Martin Luther King project in Curtis Junior High School was really large because it was a huge amount of people. There was a lot of documentation, and the piece went off quite well. So I felt, I don't know about powerful, but I felt capable.
He does many, many forms of women, and those forms are beautifully articulated. They are expressive and voluptuous and gorgeous. There's no exploitation of the female form. There's cherishing and celebration of the female form. It's really, really fantastic to see his work, to see the development of his work, to see his pieces, each of them expressing something beautiful, something profound, and something really unique.
The female form drew me into that, the black female form, because black women weren't being displayed as being beautiful, and that form was not being shown in museums that I had been to, and they weren't in galleries. So, in any case, I looked at all those possibilities and all those things, and I just continued to. I said, well, this is something I'm going to do. So I went and gathered up models, and I just about casted all the women in LA. It felt like at one point. I had spoken to them about one thing. I started out drawing my models and realized that I didn't want to be a camera. I wanted to document. So I ended up getting the camera, and eventually I started doing the body cast. But out of that 45 years of research and development, I finally realized that what I had found was that there's 15 basic body forms that African American women have. And then there are like 5 basic forms that European, African, and Asian women have. And that's because of the slavery experience. But that didn't come until way down the line as far as the acknowledgement of that. I had done a lot of other work before that. But I think the most important thing, politically, I was not really looking at that as being a political wedge in what I was doing. I was just basically trying to capture that beauty and understand that anatomy and the miracle of the reproductive. The whole process was just, it's overwhelming for me. I mean, and to this day, I'm still involved in that rebirth process, where things come from and where things go. And the black female form has become more politically a thing of beauty now than ever before. I grew up at a time when a woman that cut her hair into a natural was considered, like something really bad, really like a dyke or something like that, excuse the expression, but something that wasn't wholesome to the community. Women, I even had friends that would stitch, weave other bits of hair and weave things into their hair into African style. They were laughed at back in the 60s. I had very progressive female women that did things that were uplifting to to the culture, but the culture wasn't aware of where they came from or where they were going. And now all that stuff is like cutting edge. And at the same time, I'm documenting like pieces like Marie. Marie was one of those females that would stitch stuff in her hair, or would braid hair for other people and things like that. That piece became very popular. And also, it led me to some other steps and stages in the development of my art. Also, I have to say, my mother was a big influence in how I approached the form as well, because I was always doing nude women. And she said to me, she says, Charles, you know, you're always doing nude women. Why don't you do something like a flower? So I started doing flowers. And that kind of supplemented where I was into. I like flowers, I like fish, I like all kinds of things. But the thing is that flowers were just so much in tune with the female form till it was just a natural flow for me. And to this day, I integrate flowers into the female form as one entity. There's a show I'm developing of metaphors where the metaphor of the beauty of a woman is like a bouquet. And so I will develop a bouquet, but within the bouquet, there'll be a female form.
Speaking of female forms, for 39 years, Charles has managed to enjoy his chosen female form. Behind every man, there should be a good woman, and Charles has Darlene. She is his voice of reason, his balancing force. She is encouraging, tender, endearing, and watchful of Charles's well-being. And it is Darlene who also handles the business side of the studio, which includes the selling of his art pieces and his commissioned artwork.
I met him in my neighborhood. We went to school together, and after getting out of high school, we ran back into each other, and that's when I discovered he was such a phenomenal artist.
When I first met Darlene, we met in a because we went to school together. We went to school together. We were apart for like 8 years in our different travels. And then we met, and then once we met, we were never apart after that. She drove faster than me. She's very aggressive person. And one thing she did that impressed me was when I forgot to pay my electric bill. And I had to, as always, a deadline. I had to do this piece for a show. And she said, well, why not let's just take extension cords and use your neighbor's lights? So I said, wow, that's pretty good. And I did that.
All of us have our own talents that we bring to the table as far as couples and stuff like that. I think mine is organization and being pretty much a hard nose, saying, no, you can't do that. No, you're not using all of that gold, or put that amber down and walk away from it. So I do kind of keep him from using too many expensive items in one kind of a thing.
To that kind of thinking. She's the total opposite of who I am. Not to say that, I'm not as giving and as loving as my wife is, but she will, she'll say, oh, you need it? Here, take it, just take it. And let me give you something else. She'll do that. And I say, honey, they don't want everything you got. You just give them enough to get them through.
He is very giving of himself. And he's a loving, a strangely loving person. Because what I mean is, when you see him when you see us in public, we're together, but we're almost like separate, because we're going both our ways and trying to look at as much art as we can look at and whatnot like that. But when we get together, we're a very loving, sweet couple. So yeah, he's a very kind and loving and supportive husband, and supportive very much so too, because he wants me to do what I want to do, which is very important to women, to have that feeling of being supported and loved, and yeah, baby, go on out and do that. That's cool.
I like to share other things, technologies. But she's been a tremendous supporter, and I cannot mention her whenever I'm getting an award or something's going on. She's always at the forefront of my thinking. We've been married for, I think it would be 39 years this year, and it's, marriage is the type of thing. I was always under the understanding that marriage is something that once you buy into it, you fulfill it till the end, and that's what we do. We're trying to learn and grow together.
He does create out of his mind, out of what God gives him. So therefore, it's kind of hard to keep up with what he wants to do, especially as he gotten older, because he's created all of these other art forms. And that is sometimes challenging to kind of understand what is going on with a person's mind and keeps creating different art forms and whatnot. It's kind of weird to me to see the creative process. But as the years have gone on, I've kind of understood what that was all about and the necessity to do it, because artists have a necessity to do the art that they do.
It's not perfect, but we try to understand. And when we don't try to understand, we go to blows. No, not that kind of blow.
He didn't seem to pay any attention to me, so I'd get butt naked and be dancing, and he'd be like, zzz, bang, 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 look up, hey, baby, how you doing? Yeah, okay, yeah, sure. Boom, boom, boom. Well, what the heck is that? So, in the early years, I was saying, wait a minute, this brother, I don't know. He's too involved in this stuff. But, after the years went on, I kind of understood what the involvement was, and it wasn't directed toward me. It wasn't personal.
I try to consider her feelings. She tries to consider my feelings. And, but she does things, like, for instance, when I go through challenges, and she's always that voice that says, they're just trying to trip you up. Don't let them mess with your head like that. Just keep going at doing what you're doing, and it'll be all right. Don't ignore that. That's a trap. And God speaks through us in many, many, many ways, and we always have to be receptive to the voice, quiet enough to hear that our information comes from all around us. And I always listen to what she says. Sometimes I don't listen. I don't do everything she says. Darlene is very fast. She'll say, jump over that river. And I don't have to jump over that river just yet. I could maybe build something and fly over that sucker, So, I mean, just different things. She's a good influence. I love her.
Sometimes I'll get on the phone, call people up and say, hey, I'm sending you an email, look at it. I'll call gallery owners that we know that have dealt with his work. He basically picks out the museums or galleries and stuff like that he wants to go into. But definitely when he makes a piece that, I'm making this, and I think I'm gonna sell it. I'm on it. I'm on the phone, because there are collectors out there that are just waiting for one-of-a-kind items. And that's why Charles got into the bronze work, so he didn't have to do that one-of-a-kind item, which sometimes can be more expensive than a bronze piece.
Keep evolving. As an artist, when you stay in the same place, you're not happy. So there has to be a constant challenge in your life to move forward. And I think Charles is about that constantly because of all the different materials and the different things that he's been involved with. He's constantly searching and trying to better himself, to know that there is no end.
He is honest and forthright, and you can appreciate that in everyday conversation with him.
Charles Dickson is one of a kind. He is goodness personified. I've never seen Charles lose his temper with people. His generosity flows in a way that it's seldom seen, and I admire it. I will always admire it. I love Charles, his work, his family, and his vision.
I always wanted to make a legacy or a tone. You know, I love Miles Davis. I love Coltrane. They left legacies of tone and of commitment. And I would like for people to remember me as someone that shared the technology. I didn't have to hold back and say this is uniquely me, because the uniqueness comes out of what you say or what you do, not the technology per se. But also to like take it to a place to where it's real. It's not just something that I just pulled up and I didn't have the substance that made it, that gave it that energy that it needed to have for it to vibrate, so that you would come back to it and it speaks to you again and again and again. So that's the kind of things, that's the kind of legacy I want to leave with my work and with people.
Art lives in the hearts and minds of people, and that is the legacy Charles seeks. Discovering this man through his work and the people surrounding him offers us an intimate insight. We have been made aware of Charles the man and the sculptor, and his commitment to his creator, to his family, to his community, to the expression of his soul, and to his overcoming adversity. We have witnessed his masculinity, his humility, his steadfastness, and the uncommon gift of his powers of observation, his incredibly keen eye, his curiosity, and his inventiveness that is sometimes playfully translated into his artistic forms. And Charles invites us into the sheer joy of personal expression and self-discovery, whether it be his own or inspiring others to express themselves artistically. As Charles was once advised, just do the work, and he does. Charles Dickson is a truly extraordinary, one-of-a-kind American sculptor.